Hello, hello. Thank you for joining me. I have begun to read book number 28 in my A Book a Week series, and I want to share what that is today. This is a book that's been recommended to me a number of times by people from different spaces in my life. We all have a voice that has something to say about everything that is happening throughout our day. And that oftentimes, until we are introduced to the thought that someone else has this voice monitoring their day in their system, we don't even recognize that we have that. We identify with it as ourself, or maybe it's so incredibly familiar to us because it's been living in us, with us for so long, narrating our world for us, criticizing us, or approving of us for so long that we haven't even noticed it. I think that this is something that develops very, very early in our lives, and I think that it makes sense that it would develop. I think that when we are infants and toddlers, we're beginning to relate to the world with a little more sensation of agency, and that we troubleshoot as we adventure and experiment, and we collect feedback and stimulus from our ecosystem and from the leaders in our world, our parents and our family and our siblings and our teachers, and we get feedback about what's okay and what's not okay. And I think that as we begin to identify that we are an organism, we begin to identify with the thought that other older people in our space identify themselves as separate from us, and then we begin to identify as separate also. And then I think that the critical thing we learn here is that what we do, we must think about ahead of time. And oftentimes there is some fear, guilt, shame, wrapped up, maybe anger as well, wrapped up into this stage of learning, these memories of learning, and they store in our cellular structure. And you can, of course, understand why that might be the case. It's typically because we're being taught how to survive, how to not hurt ourselves, how not to plunge to our death over a balcony or down wooden stairs. And our guides in being human are incredibly concerned for our safety. And so they respond to the things that we're experimenting with that concern, and sometimes with judgment, like how dare you, which would begin a shame cycle in our experience. Or imagine if you were to experiment with a movement with your body, like pushing another child or hitting, which is something that most, if not all, toddlers experiment with. There would be a reaction from adults that is oftentimes either angry or maybe scared or suspicious of who you are. Are you a bad kid? You know? So all these questions enter your mind that suggest that you should think through things quite a bit as you do them. And I think that this is when this voice enters our systems, analyzing and narrating with everything that we do. And it's born so early in life that, of course, we may not notice it until much, much later, when someone else examines their own systems and reflects on their noting that this is arising in their own systems. So I've now read about this concept in a number of books, and I think that it's incredibly refreshing to read of it from many different reflection points, and I think that Michael Singer does an excellent job of creating imagery around his intention that we recognize this in ourselves. And so I'm going to tie this into the first quote that I'll read from this book. This is on page 13. Basically, you recreate the outside world inside yourself, and then you live in your mind. What if you decided not to do this? If you decide not to narrate, and instead just consciously observe the world, you will feel more open and exposed. This is because you really don't know what will happen next, and your mind is accustomed to helping you. It does this by processing your current experiences in a way that makes them fit with your views of the past and visions of the future. All of this helps to create a semblance of control. If your mind doesn't do this, you simply become too uncomfortable. Reality is just too real for most of us, so we temper it with the mind. You will come to see that the mind talks all the time because you gave it a job to do. You use it as a protection mechanism, a form of defense. Ultimately, it makes you feel more secure. As long as that's what you want, you will be forced to constantly use your mind to buffer yourself from life instead of living it. This world is unfolding and really has very little to do with you or your thoughts. It was here long before you came, and it will be here long after you leave. In the name of attempting to hold the world together, you're really just trying to hold yourself together. Wonderful. I'll read more in a little bit. And before I move on to more vocal readings, I want to tie this into something that, of course, interweaves with Alan Watts and Eckhart Tolle, Pema Chodron, Thich Nhat Hanh. What we understand is that there is an eternal gift to open in the present moment. It is all there for us. What we can learn to do is to uncover it by clearing away the traffic. And this book vividly describes to us how that traffic came to be and how it manifests in our systems and how it is functioning to give us a sensation of control, however futile that sensation is, in actually engaging us in any achievement of control. And in so doing, pushes us away, separates us from the eternal present moment. Without further ado, I'll move on toward today's readings. Enjoy.
Page 10. There's nothing more important to true growth than realizing that you are not the voice of the mind. You are the one who hears it. If you don't understand this, you will try to figure out which of the many things the voice says is really you. People go through so many changes in the name of trying to find myself. They want to discover which of these voices, which of these aspects of their personality is who they really are. The answer is simple. None of them. Page 11. If you watch objectively, you will see that when there's a buildup of nervous, fearful, or desire-based energies inside, the voice becomes extremely active. This is easy to see when you are angry with someone and you feel like telling them off. Just watch how many times the inner voice tells them off before you even see them. When energy builds up inside, you want to do something about it. That voice talks because you're not okay inside, and talking releases energy. Page 13. If used properly, the same mental voice that has been a source of worry, distraction, and general neurosis can become the launching ground for true spiritual awakening. Come to know the one who watches the voice, and you will come to know one of the great mysteries of creation. Page 15. Your inner growth is completely dependent upon the realization that the only way to find peace and contentment is to stop thinking about yourself. You're ready to grow when you finally realize that the I who's always talking inside will never be content. It always has a problem with something. Honestly, when was the last time you really had nothing bothering you? Before you had your current problem, there was a different problem. And if you're wise, you will realize that after this one's gone, there will be another one. Page 16. The subject is called the witness because it is the one who sees what's happening. The object is what you're seeing, in this case, the inner disturbance. This act of maintaining objective awareness of the inner problem is always better than losing yourself in the outer situation. I'm skipping down a bit. You think that if you change things outside, you'll be okay. But nobody has ever truly become okay by changing things outside. There's always the next problem. The only real solution is to take the seat of witness consciousness and completely change your frame of reference. Page 35. The lost soul is the consciousness that is dropped into the place where one human's thoughts, emotions, and sensory perceptions of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell are all synchronized. All these messages come back to one spot. Then, the consciousness, which is capable of being aware of anything, makes the mistake of focusing on that one spot too closely. When the consciousness gets sucked in, it no longer knows itself as itself. It knows itself as the objects it is experiencing. In other words, you perceive yourself as these objects. You think you are the sum of your learned experiences. Page 36. What differentiates a conscious, centered being from a person who is not so conscious is simply the focus of their awareness. It's not a difference in the consciousness itself. All consciousness is the same. Just as all light from the sun is the same, all awareness is the same. Consciousness is neither pure nor impure. It has no qualities. It's just there, aware that it's aware. The difference is that when your consciousness is not centered within, it becomes totally focused on the objects of consciousness. When you are a centered being, however, your consciousness is always aware of being conscious. Your awareness of being is independent of the inner and outer objects you happen to be aware of. Page 37. When you contemplate the nature of self, you are meditating. That is why meditation is the highest state. It is the return to the root of your being, the simple awareness of being aware. Once you become conscious of the consciousness itself, you attain a totally different state. You are now aware of who you are. You have become an awakened being. It's really just the most natural thing in the world. Here I am. Here I always was. It's like you have been on the couch watching TV, but you were so totally immersed in the show that you forgot where you were. Someone shook you, and now you're back to the awareness that you're sitting on the couch watching TV. Nothing else changed. You simply stopped projecting your sense of self onto that particular object of consciousness. You woke up. That is spirituality. That is the nature of self. That is who you are.